Welcome to a new series where I take one of my books and analyze it from start to finish to show you every single element that is in there, how it relates back to the external plot, the internal plot, and the genre plot, and how you can do the same with your book. One of the things that people ask me for a lot is to really analyze how a book goes together. And of course, I know my books better than I know anybody else's, so I'm going to use one of my own. This one happens to be a single title romance novel, so it's a longer book, 85,000 words, and it is also a genre novel, so that you can see how the elements of the genre fit in there as well. Now, if you're taking my Write a Book in 12 Weeks course, or if you're taking my Writing Compelling Romance Novels course, this absolutely goes along with it. If you're not taking those courses yet and you want to, you can use code YouTube for 10% off, and the link is down below. But I'm not here to sell you on taking a course. I'm here to dive right into chapter 1 and show you how it went together. In one of my manuscript feedback sessions a few weeks ago, I showed everybody the very first version of this first page, version that ended up getting submitted to the publisher and selling, and then finally the version that ended up making it onto the page in the end. Because of course, like any author, I'm revising and making it stronger and better as I go. And as I get to know the characters and I get to know what I'm writing, I figure out where it should go. Now, with this particular book, which is called From There to Back Again, I actually had written chapter 2, which I'll get to in a future video, before I ever wrote chapter 1. When I wrote chapter 2, which is from the point of view of a secondary character, I was just having fun. And I really liked that character. And I thought, okay, I need to put her in a book. So I ended up writing a single title romance that could use that character in a subplot. From There to Back Again is about a woman who kind of uproots her entire life because she inherits a house from a mother she never met, and a hero who was a Coast Guard helicopter pilot who got blinded in an accident that killed his best friend. So it's these two people from two totally different worlds coming together. So I've got that trope. And then I've got him as a self-proclaimed ogre. So it's also that kind of fairy tale trope of Beauty and the Beast. But that doesn't show up on page 1 because this is a single title romance, which means you don't have to have the hero and heroine together on the very first page. You do not have to have them meet cute on the very first page. A single title book has a lot more words, generally 80 to 100,000 words. So you have a lot more room for character development, subplots, and secondary characters. So I took a few pages until I got to the hero and heroine meeting. Let's talk first about the opening line and what is so important about those first couple of lines. Olivia Linscott made the most insane decision of her life in less time than it took to microwave a burrito. That is setting the stage that this is a little bit funny, it's a little bit humorous, and that we're going on some kind of a journey here with the character that is going to be important to her. Before she could think twice, or worse, hesitate, so now we know a little bit about her, she packed what remained of her belongings into her car, loaded up on gas and 5-hour energy drinks, then ditched her life in Massachusetts and headed south. So I have already established who she is and what she's doing and what's at stake here in a little bit of a way. And I've also hopefully hooked the reader by them saying, what is the most insane decision of Olivia's life and why is she doing this? That's what that first paragraph is all about, is establishing the character, establishing the tone of your book, because that first page is a promise to the reader of what kind of experience they're going to get, and establishing the relationship between the reader and the character so that the reader begins to care. It's a lot of work for one paragraph. It really is, but you can absolutely make it happen. The first few pages, my character is driving, so that allows me some time to have some backstory, but I don't make a huge backstory dump. I have her on the phone on purpose so that I have some action going on while she is making this drive from Boston to Florida. I establish her goal, motivation, conflict on the very first page. Her goal is to restart her life down in Florida. Her motivation is right there in the second paragraph, all because a lawyer had shown up on her doorstep with a mysterious will, a crinkled photograph, and a butterfly necklace. Her internal goal comes right at the end of the third paragraph, and we don't know enough about what's going on with her yet to understand where it's coming from, but we know that something is going on with her emotionally. Down here, Olivia could breathe, really breathe, in more ways than one. So something is going on there. It's a teeny tiny bit of foreshadowing that I laid in there. Then she acts and she calls her mother, and this is one of those micro action scenes that I talked about in the care video. When her mother answered with her familiar chirpy hello, a wave of homesickness crashed over Olivia, and for a second she had the urge to turn around and head back to everything familiar. The calling is the action. The reaction is hearing her mother's voice and it really overwhelming her, and the impact is that she wants to turn around so badly, but she doesn't. She has a conversation with her mother, but that brings in the backstory and a little bit of history about who Olivia's mother is and who Olivia is in a sort of active way. So she talks about how she should maybe speed down there because she's been driving for so long, and then her mother says, If you do, I'll fly down there and take away your car keys, even if you are almost 30. So boom, we get her age. We know who she is. We know that her mother's a little bit controlling and that Olivia is willing to kind of bend the rules a little bit. All that is just laid out in a couple of lines of dialogue. Then, as she starts to pull into the small town where this book is set, we start to see it. I want to drop that setting in very early because that's one of the things that a reader that picks up a small town contemporary romance novel is going to be looking for. They want to see that town. And so I'm bringing it in with a lot of description, a lot of showing. A half dozen bright, happy shops lined a wide boardwalk across the street from the beach. A white and pink awning fronted the Rescue Bay ice cream stand, a quaint little place with umbrella-covered tables and a giant plastic cow sporting a bright pink bow. Elderly couple enjoying swirled cones, one chocolate, one vanilla, raised a hand in greeting as Olivia drove past. So what do we know about this town in 3 lines? We know that it's kind of quaint and cute and that the people there are friendly. So we're already setting up what this world is that she is walking into. And for Olivia, that's important. Her reaction to this is there was something warm about this town, something Olivia had liked the second she arrived. And she starts describing it to her mother. And we get a little bit more of her mother and a little bit more of the backstory and a little bit more of the diametric opposite world that Olivia is in now compared to the one she was in before. Because her mother starts talking about it snowing in Boston and Olivia's in Florida in January. I always like to add a little bit of some kind of homespun wisdom or some kind of little connection to the past when I have a family-oriented story. And her mother says something about, if you see a ladybug, and Olivia finishes that sentence, and she lands on your hand, spring is on its way. And I'm hoping that by now, which is about the middle of page 3, you are loving Olivia and her mother, and you're seeing their relationship. They're not arguing per se, even though her mother is a little bit bossy, but they have a kind of history that you are seeing just in these 3 pages in their conversation. So by doing it that way, I'm showing instead of telling what her relationship with her mother is like. Then I go back to Olivia's goal because I'm layering this in.
Layers!
We already know that she has thrown her life in Massachusetts away to come down here because she inherited something from her mother. But now I want to kind of layer in a little bit more about what that goal exactly is. She looks at a picture that she has taped to her dash, and it's this lovely little Florida bungalow, painted in sherbet colors of pale yellow and soft salmon and trimmed in white, nestled in the middle of a neat yard, flanked by rows of blooming annuals and fruit-laden citrus trees. So it sounds like Olivia is walking into utopia. Except she's not. So she's a little worried about whether she's doing the right thing, and she has that conversation with her mother for a second. And then we get into her internal again. Olivia's finger danced across the picture again. Would she finally have the answers that she needed is what she's thinking about. All her life, Olivia had felt like a lock without the right key, a puzzle missing a piece. Now maybe here she'd find what she was searching for, herself. And if not, at least she'd get one hell of a tan. So right there, I work in her internal, that she has some kind of a deep emotional wound where she doesn't feel like she really belongs in the world, and she's trying to put those puzzle pieces together. So that kind of breaks up that pathos. Olivia's biological mother died. She's starting her life over again. She's a little sad. She's homesick. And then we add a little joke. So we kind of bring that roller coaster back up a little bit with a little bit of humor. Then I give Olivia a second to think, because I want to have, again, a little bit more of that backstory, but I want to work it in an active way. So her mother says, hold on a second, your dad's beeping in. I just got to answer him about what I want at the store. So now Olivia has a second to kind of process what she has learned and what she is thinking. Then the lawyer asked if she knew the identity of her biological mother, and Olivia's world flipped upside down. The woman who had given birth to her then walked out of Brigham and Women's Hospital, leaving her newborn daughter behind. Her birth mother, a woman she'd never met, a woman who'd never contacted her, never done so much as send her a Christmas card. So what do we see in that? We see that little bit of hurt that's in Olivia and a little bit more of her motivation for why she would drive all the way to Florida to a property that she inherited, because she really needs those answers. Remember, I said it was like a missing piece in her or a key that fits the right lock. She's trying to figure out why her mother left her, why she'd never contacted her, and then why'd she leave her this property? And in case the reader still isn't sure, I have her motivation laid out very clearly a couple paragraphs later. Her only link to Bridget Tuttle, which is her biological mother, remained in this piece of property in the town of Rescue Bay. Someone here had to have known her mother and be able to fill in the blanks that now gaped like black holes. So that is what Olivia really, really wants. But there's also more going on. She's had some stuff in her personal life that has fallen apart, and she's thinking that the sun and the beach will make her feel renewed, refreshed, re-energized, and she wanted to soak up the warmth to And I have on purpose 3 dots, to thaw, because it's not about her taking away the cold from Boston. It's about taking away the cold that is in her heart. That's what those 3 dots hopefully allow the reader to infer. She has another bit more of conversation with her mother, and she has, again, a little wave of homesickness, because that is the natural reaction, right? You want to have a natural progression of action throughout your scenes. So as the mother comes back and, she's reminded of her life back home, she has that little bit of homesickness. Then she finally arrives at her destination, and she's still on the phone with her mother, and her mother's thinking, this is going to be a great house, right? And Olivia pulls up, and her first thought is, holy crap. The perfect little bungalow turned out to be a rundown building on a dead-end street with an overgrown, sprawling backyard and a decaying wraparound front porch. The scene goal was to get down there and get to this property so she can start her life over again. She got there okay, but this is not what she imagined. It's just a train wreck of a house. It's all fallen apart. So that is something I talk about in my masterclass on scenes, that the end of a scene, or as you're going through the scene, you want them to either achieve their goal or not, but you want things to get worse. It turns out that this house was also an animal shelter, and Olivia finds an emaciated and hurt golden retriever laying underneath the awning. This dog, throughout this entire book, is sort of a metaphor for what is going on with the hero and heroine. I use this dog a lot to sort of show who the people are, how they are wounded, and how they begin to heal. And her decision, which is how a sequel works, they have a problem, they have a question of what they're going to do, and then they make a decision and take an action. Her decision is that she was tired of being a failure, failing at her marriage, failing at her previous job, failure at taking risks, and she decides that she is going to make this work no matter what. And so she's going to start with the dog. The dog takes off into the woods, and she has lost it, and she has failed at this first attempt to make this new life work. The dog has gone next door, and so she kind of crawls through the bushes to get there, and here's the meeting with the hero at the bottom of page 14. And remember, I told you that he's kind of like an ogre, so it's a Beauty and the Beast type trope. And his first words to her are, what the hell are you doing? And then I describe him, and hopefully I'm showing in this point as well, so that it's not a lot of telling. There's very little of the verb to be. The verb to be is a key indication that you're telling. When you use more powerful verbs and more powerful adjectives and nouns, you create something that is more visual for the reader and engages their imagination. I really work hard on these paragraphs. I go back and fix it and fix it and fix it and fix it to really make these words more powerful. Blue jeans hugged his thighs, and a black t-shirt sporting a Harley-Davidson logo outlined a defined hard chest and muscled biceps. The man had short-cropped, deep brown hair and a chiseled jaw shadowed with rough stubble. Dark sunglasses hid his eyes despite the setting sun behind him. On one side of his face, a jagged scar peeked out from under the sunglasses, which only added to the air of mystery. He looked dangerous. So there's no questioning that she is attracted to him here, but then she just decides to herself that her priority is not the man, because again, in a romance, character's number one goal is not to fall in love. It is to accomplish whatever the external goal is for the character. Falling in love becomes a complication. It becomes a monkey wrench in the plans. So her first priority is the golden retriever. And she asks him about the dog. And he says, I don't see it. And they have a little bit of a exchange that's a little bit of a repartee. So he accuses her of being a Debbie do-gooder out to save the world. And she says, I'm trying to save a dog, not the whole world. That's all. I've got enough on my plate. So she says that, and it intrigues him a little bit, but he's not going to show it. The reader also doesn't know what all else is on her plate. He says, you and me both, lady. You and me both. So he repeats it, and now hopefully the reader is thinking, wow, what's going on in his head and his heart? What is happening here? He let out a long breath and turned away. And now I want to build in a moment before I go on with the plot. So I have a paragraph that is showing, that gives my reader the space to just kind of process what he just said, develop a little bit of affection for him while he is taking a second to himself. In the distance, someone started a lawnmower. The low drone of the engine overpowered the song of the birds and sent the pungent smell of gasoline into the air. Crickets chirped in the deep grass, hidden under the carpet of green. A soft breeze tickled a path down the yard. So now we're kind of seeing the space, right? But we've also had a moment for Luke, the hero, to breathe. And he says, well, if you find what you're looking for, let me know. And we know from that line that he had before that there's double meaning in there, that he's not just talking about the dog, he's kind of talking about finding himself. After that, she sees the dog, she bends down and she's like, here, you want some cookies? And he thinks she's talking to him. And he's like, if you have chocolate chip cookies, I'll reconsider because I'm full. And she says they're liver-flavored biscuits, and they have a little bit of repartee, like I said. He says, why do you have those? And she says, because the dog. See him right there? And he says, I don't see anything. And she says, what, are you blind? And she's just kidding. But he takes personal offense because the reader knows from the back cover blurb that he is. He's having a lot of trouble with his vision. Because remember, the other thing I've said about romance novels is that there's a lot of hope and despair. Hope that the characters are going to work it out. Despair that they're not. So when they're kind of arguing a little bit because he's clearly got something going on inside of his emotions that he's not sharing, there's despair, like maybe they're never going to make it work. But then when they have that little bit of repartee, there's hope. So she says, it was for a good cause, and he smirked. That's what all criminals say. I'm not a criminal, she says. I'm a good person with good intentions. Unlike you, and she just lets her voice trail off. And he calls himself an ogre. And now she sees him again, and she again has that attraction to him, the edge to him that whispered dangerous heartbreaker, yet at the same time he carried an air of animal confidence that said a night with him would be amazing, unforgettable, curl your toes amazing. She kind of clears her throat because she doesn't want him to know she's been looking at him and says, I wouldn't call you an ogre. And now we have this little bit of sexual tension between them, because that's very important in a romance, to establish that so that the reader believes that these two people could possibly fall in love. He arched a brow and something like a smile flickered on his face. A delicious quiver slid through her veins. Now I want you to look again at the showing in there. There's no to be verb. There are stronger verbs: arched, flickered, quiver, slid. All of that is stronger than saying that there was a smile on his face. There was a quiver that ran through her. That is more telling rather than a delicious quiver slid through her veins. It engages the reader's imagination and lets them know what's going on. And he says, and what would you call me? And she's, of course, not going to tell him how she feels. I don't know, but it sure as hell wouldn't be Mr. Rogers. He laughed. On that, I would agree. So again, that line that he has, we get another little hint that there's something going on. The moment of detente extended between them, an olive branch, thin, but a start. She goes and introduces herself to him, and they shake hands. And then, hopefully this is a little twist the reader didn't see coming, he says, stay on your side of the fence. We ogres don't like to be bothered. Then he goes away. So instead of this, they're falling in love all of a sudden, it's everything's hunky-dory and it's wonderful, he pushes her right away. The reader kind of knows why, but not entirely yet. Now Olivia is left alone with what she has come upon. So we're coming back to what has already happened in the scene. She's thinking, I don't even know how to hammer a nail. What am I going to do? About 4 paragraphs before the end of the scene, and she's like, I can do this. But it wouldn't be an engaging novel if it just stopped on this, yeah, I got this, and note, because we really want the reader to keep reading. We really want the reader to be invested, to feel for Olivia, to see the overwhelm that she's going to feel. And now her resolve wavers, and the bravado that had held Olivia together for 1,400 miles crumpled. Burning tears rushed to the surface and spilled down her cheeks. She dropped to the ground and gathered the only friend she had in Rescue Bay into her arms. So it's ending on a little bit of a sad note, but we also know that Olivia's got this kind of can-do spirit. So we're hoping that she's just going to pick herself up in the next chapter that has Olivia and just get right to work. So let's recap real quickly the different components that are in there. We have the book goal, motivation, conflict for Olivia, which the scene goal is just to get to the house. The subplot that pops up on page 11 is the injured dog. The romance comes up on page 14. This chapter has also established some, but not all, of the heroine's backstory, and some, but not all, of her internal goal, motivation, conflict. And hopefully in these 20 pages, built a connection between the reader and Olivia so that the reader cares and wants to keep going. Now, let me know in the comments what you think about everything that I just dropped here. I know it's a lot to process, but I really want to take you through this book so that you understand every element of it and how it all comes together. And then how you can take that and apply that to your own book. If you want to dig deeper into a scene from that book, then check out my masterclass on scenes. I would also be remiss if I didn't remember to say, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you can get a lot more writing craft information. And also like this video so that other writers can find it, because sharing is caring.